The Marsden Rattler. Its famous in Geordie folklore tradition is the train that plied its trade up and down this part of the northeast coast, carrying excited school children on their annual seaside outings. It's long gone now, and all that's left to remind us of its illustrious past is this pub, where people can enjoy a drink and a bite to eat. But what's not generally appreciated is that just across the road from here is what remains of a railway system which, in its own way, was just as important. Let's go and take a look. Westow Colliery was, until recently, host to the unique Harton electric railway system. For over 80 years, from 1908 to 1989, the system operated in and around this part of South Shields, transporting coal and waste down to Harton Low staithes to be shipped, in the case of coal, to the customer, and in the case of waste, to be dumped out at sea. Unfortunately, the Harton electric railway system is being replaced, marking the end of the line for Britain's only industrial electric railway. But how did it come into being in the first place? Well, the reasons lie in the history of the Harton Coal Company and the location of its pits. There were several German shareholders in the company, and it was natural for them to choose electric to link their pits at Hilda, Harton, Bolden and Whitburn. Indeed, the German influence can be seen in the equipment used, much of which is of German origin. Then there's the site. The rail network runs through the town of South Shields. The disturbance that steam would have caused to residents along Erskine Bank and the Hilda sidings was thought to be unacceptable. What's more, the steep gradients and low-roof tunnels were more easily negotiated by German-built electric locomotives. That's basically why they chose electric. Now let's take a look at the equipment itself. All the lines except that to Whitburn were electrified on the overhead system at 550 volts DC, with an average wire height of 12.5 feet. The work was done by Siemens Schuckert of Germany, who also provided the substation equipment and the locomotives. One German-built locomotive, number 9, worked on the system up to its demise, having arrived from AEG of Berlin in 1913. That fact alone is testimony to the reliability of the system and the excellent workshop maintenance program carried out on site at the colliery. Locomotive number 9, with its 4 61.5 horsepower motors, has not been lost forever. It has a new home at a nearby museum. Engines numbers 1 and 4 have also been preserved. Naturally, the German influence disappeared after the outbreak of the First World War. Locomotives and their components tended to be British-made. For example, 5 DK32A motors were purchased from English Electric in 1924 and mounted in locomotive number 8, with one being used as a spare. Locomotives 11 and 12, powered by 100 horsepower motors, were bought from English Electric in 1951 to handle the heavier 21-ton hopper wagons which were being introduced. They were followed by 3 more in 1957 and 1959. Development of the line also continued. The new coal preparation plant, built in 1954, meant additional electrified tracks. The overhead was by BICC, who used H-girder supports, and those also replaced some of the Siemens lattice poles. The NCB even bought up second-hand equipment as the trolleybus operations in the area began to close. At the end of its days, Westow's substation was equipped with silicon diode rectifiers supplied by Northern Engineering Industries. However, the mercury arc sets remained for many years, forming standby equipment. That's enough about the hardware. Let's take a look at the route the railway took and just what it was used for. Well, in truth, there's little to be said for the majority of the route, linking as it did the pits already mentioned to Harton Low Staithes. Here at Hilda Sidings, the site of the old Hilda Colliery, which closed in 1940, there's a pivotal point of the network, with hopper wagons being deposited to be picked up in batches of 8 for the short journey to the Staithes. The length and weight of the train was limited to 8 wagons because of the steep gradient and sharp curve. What's more, only certain locos could work this section because of the restricted height of the tunnel. But it's here that we find the real area of interest. There's nothing here now except a beautiful coastline. But at one time, just a few yards inland from where I'm sitting, was the line which linked Whitburn Colliery further down the coast to Westow, which you can see behind me. It was the only section which wasn't electrified, being steam for most of its life. The public as well as mine workers used this section of line until it was closed to passengers in 1953. Incidentally, the return fare for the journey from Westow Lane Station to Marston remained at 6pence from the late 1800s until the line closed. The electric section of the system, however, remained open for another 36 years, and to the end of its days both men and machinery did a valuable job. Over 80 men were working on the system when it closed, not just guards and drivers, but maintenance men working on both the locos and the workshops and on the considerable lengths of track and overhead wire. The railway also continued to carry a heavy load. Around 7,000 tons of coal a day was hauled down to the Staithes, to be loaded into ships ready for the journey down to the power stations on the Thames. And it didn't just carry coal. 2,500 tons of shale were also transported each day, to be deposited by barge in the North Sea. The routine of a driver working on the system must have changed little over the 80 years of the system's life. His first job was always to call at the workshops, so he could pick up his sand for the sandboxes. The sand was vital to help the locos negotiate the system's steep gradients, and an ample supply of sand was available a matter of yards away on the nearby beach. Each train had 2 men, a driver and a guard, with both riding on the engine. The guard's job seems to have been especially taxing. It was his responsibility to attend to the couplings and to set or release individual wagon brakes. This was often done on the move and required a great deal of agility, fitness, and a tough hide. Much of the system is already gone, but there's one exception, and that's the section from here at Hilda Sidings down to the Staithes itself, which, as I speak, is in the last few weeks of its working life. As it happens, this section provides a most exciting journey, and we're lucky enough to be given the chance to experience it. So let's climb on board. I've been promised I'm in for an exciting trip, so let's take a look. Okay, Jim? Well, that was really something. Unfortunately, it's one of the last journeys this old workhorse will be making. However, it won't be lost forever. It will linger long in the memories of the men who worked here, and I'm sure that a few of them will be checking up on 1 or 2 old friends by visiting the locomotives in their new homes in local museums. and in a sense the tradition continues in the form of the metro system. The differences are obvious, but the romance of rail travel remains. Perhaps in generations to come, train enthusiasts will talk of the Tyneside Metro with the same affection that they now reserve for the Harton electric railway system.